I've had the pleasure of using Atlassian JIRA for most of my programming career, and I've always wondered, how do you even deploy this thing? This is exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to install JIRA on NixOS. But before we can actually deploy it on NixOS, we need a NixOS machine. And this is exactly what we're going to get now. For this video, I'm going to get an EC2 instance on Amazon Web Services, but you can deploy NixOS on anything else, and this should work the same way. So let's get to it. First, we have to get to the console. We go to EC2, we can search that in the search window, and we go to EC2, we select Launch Instance, and now we will need to choose an image for our machine. And thankfully, there is already one for NixOS, which is great because otherwise this video would have been much longer. We need to browse AMIs from the community and just search for NixOS. At the time I'm making this, I think the most recent one is 22.11. So I'm going to search for that in particular. So NixOS 22.11. And we have a choice of 3 types. The first one is an ARM machine. So I'm not going to use this simply because it's just going to possibly not work with JIRA. From the other 2, the difference is, I think, who distributes that. And this one mentions Circle. So I'm just going to use the other one. Hopefully that's the official one. Probably if you're going to use this for anything serious, you should vet where these instances come from so that you don't get like arbitrary stuff made by someone with malicious intent. So once we have chosen our template, we need to pick a bunch of other settings. And the first thing I want to change is probably the machine, like the instance type. I want something more powerful. So let's see what options we have. I think I'd like to have at least 2 vCPUs and at least 4 gigs of RAM. And I want it to be x86-64. So I think I'm going to pick T2 large. And with this option, we will proceed. Now I need to create a new key pair. This is something we will be using to get SSH access to the instance. And I'm just going to call it JIRA1. I'm going to use an RSA key, and actually I'm going to use this one, ED25519. I don't know how you pronounce this, I just know that it's supposedly better, or it's more modern. And again, if you're doing this for real, you should make your own informed decision. And I'm going to use a PEM file for OpenSSH. This has been generated and downloaded. I should have that in my downloads. Let's verify that. And there it is, there's a private key. At this point, we will need to create a security group to be able to actually call this from somewhere. I want SSH traffic and I want HTTPS traffic. Also, just for some testing, I will allow HTTP traffic, but most likely you should not do that in anything real. I don't have anything real here, so I think it's fine to use this. And now storage, I think at least 30 gigs would be good, and apparently it's part of the free tier. So I will take 30 gigs. That should be good enough. Like 3 gigs is definitely not enough for a NixOS machine, and especially if we're gonna install something else like JIRA. And advanced details, I think we don't need any of that for this thing. And I just want 1 instance. So let's launch that and wait some more. And supposedly it's there, but I know for a fact that it's going to take a while. It says pending, instance state pending. It's gonna take a couple minutes for this to start up. Okay, I see that the connect button is now ready, which means that we might be able to connect with SSH, and I'm going to try that. So here's the instruction, and this should just work actually. Okay, connection refused, so apparently it's still getting started. But if we wait some more, at some point it might actually work. This is taking a while, so I can try again with the V flag, which should be verbose. And yeah, apparently that actually works. So let's try without this flag. And yes, I think that is correct. And it complains that the SSH key that I have is not secure because it's unprotected. Let's try that again. It's not actually going to allow me to use this private key. And this is exactly what I forgot to do. We need to change the permissions on this file. So this is going to create, I think, read access for just me and no one else, and no other access for anyone else. And that would check out. So now we can try SSH again. And we are there. So this is my machine. I can verify that by doing something like nix shell neofetch. I'm just going to get this neofetch program and try to run it on my NixOS machine. Now it's being downloaded. And there we go. Let's try to run that. And yeah, we are on NixOS. So we have that part figured out. Now let's see where the configuration for the system is. And I think the default storage is in etc NixOS. We should see a configuration.nix file, and there it is. And this has some like basic setup just so that we're able to actually run NixOS on this machine. I don't want to touch this file ever, so I'm actually going to rename it to something else. I'm going to rename it to bootstrap.nix so that I can import it as sort of bootstrap script and then never touch it again and never see it again. Let's try to edit some file. There is no editor apart from like Nano. Yeah, I think Nano is built in, but there's no Vim, and I am not a fan of that. So I will actually get Vim in a shell. Actually, I'm going to get NeoVim. Let's wait for this to download. And we are there. We should be able to edit the configuration.nix file, which doesn't exist yet. And now I'm just going to create an empty config with an import, which is going to use the bootstrap.nix file. This will just mean that my new configuration just imports the previous one, and that should be the whole thing. Now let's try to rebuild that system. And we got our first warning. We need to state system state, system state version, and it's defaulting to 2211. I'm going to set it to that same value. So let's do that. Actually, neovim. So 2211, we save and we can rebuild again. Now I have only built this config, so I still need to activate it. So I can either use the link and result. I think it's result. Yeah, probably this one. I'm not using NixOS daily, so I'm not sure. But we can also use just NixOS rebuild switch, and this will activate this whole system configuration that we've built. So this is done, and we are on the new config. We should be able at this point to reboot, and we should just get everything that we wanted, which is basically the same thing that we already had, but there's no need for this. So I'm just going to open NeoVim again, and I'm going to install NeoVim, like seriously. And as far as I remember, this is environment system packages. But for this, we will need some sort of source of packages. Currently, I don't have one, and we can get this as an input to our module. So packages will be used like this. At this point, it would be good to have as like a second window of SSH. So let's get that. And I think I also want to save the history, so I'll log out of this and do this again. I think that should make sure like, yeah, this is now in the history, because I had to close this session for the commands to be saved to history. And here we will be just constantly editing the config file. Okay, so I should have NeoVim now. Actually, I'm not sure why I had it here. Oh, because it had already been installed. That actually makes sense. So we have NeoVim. At this point, it would be great to try and actually call our server using some sort of HTTP interface. And for this, I'm going to have to start some sort of server. And probably the easiest way to do this is to use netcat and start listening on some port, like maybe let's listen on 80. And in a separate shell session, I'm going to call this with curl. And I think this is all I need to do. And apparently we cannot actually call it. I think this is because the port isn't open. So let's try to open it up with some NixOS configuration. I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to change my config to have this firewall config, and that is going to be networking. Firewall allowed TCP ports. And I'm going to open up 80, 443 for HTTPS. And I'm not even sure you have to do this, but I'm just going to leave 22 for SSH out there. just in case that it would possibly disappear from the open ports. By the way, if you don't know like any of these keys, you can go to search NixOS.org and pick the options panel right here, and you can look for like TCP. This should give you firewall, networking maybe. Yeah, you'll get like the networking config. This is a long list, so I guess this is why we didn't see the thing I was actually looking for, just because there's so many options that could possibly fit. But yeah, you can actually find like this particular thing. I wonder what the default is actually. It seems like that, okay, it's like an empty list. Anyway, we have that config. Let's try to activate this, and then we will try to call our host again. So let's listen on port 80 again. And we were able to connect on TCP level. This isn't an actual HTTP server, but at this point I could actually set up one. And apparently the 80 port is now exposed to the network because we're able to actually receive a request. If you didn't know, this is what an HTTP request looks like on TCP. So I think this is time to install JIRA. Let's try to do this at least. So first, we can actually look up how to do this in the NixOS option search. And then I'm going to just search for JIRA. And yeah, this is services.jira. I think you usually have to first enable it. And we're going to do this exact thing. That's like the basic thing that you have to do. So I will do that here and set it to true and rebuild my system. And this is going to take a while, but ultimately I think it's not going to succeed. Let's see what we get. By the way, this building Nix message is kind of confusing to me because it's not actually building Nix, but the NixOS configuration. So we got the first error here. The JIRA package is an unfree license package, which means that we need to explicitly enable support for such packages in our NixOS config. And I'm going to just copy paste this. You can also do this just for a specific package, but I just want to get it over with, just do it for all packages possible. Oops, I think I accidentally reverted my changes. Okay, not anymore. And we're going to just do this and try to rebuild again. I'll just change it to build instead of switch so that we don't accidentally enable everything. Let's just try to build this config and get that part done. So it's downloading some dependencies from the NixOS cache, and we're going to just have some waiting time. Okay, so the whole thing failed. The problem is that it was trying to build the JDK, but it cannot download this file automatically. And this is the file for the Oracle JDK. And when I first saw this, I was like, why does it try to use the Oracle JDK? Because that is not the default Java version for NixOS. In NixOS, usually the default version is like an Open JDK release. But it turns out that JIRA only works with the Oracle Java. You cannot just use OpenJDK, apparently. So we actually need this specific version of Java to be available in our system, and it actually is going to be a runtime dependency of JIRA. So Nix cannot download this for us because of this license issue, and that just means that we have to download this file, this tarball, and tell Nix where it is so that Nix can like add it from disk to its internal store. And I'm going to do this exact thing. We're just going to go here to the Oracle website where we can download the appropriate Java version. And we're looking for this version 8 with the patched 281 for Linux, for x64. So let's wait for this to load. Obviously, when I'm recording this, it's taking a while. It wasn't the case before, so very happy about that. And finally it loaded, so let's see, there's some license. Of course I've read this before, so I can accept. And we are looking for, not even this is too recent. We need this exact version. I believe this is the Java archive and Java SE 8, and that was 281, so somewhere here. Let's look for 281. There it is. And we want this one with Linux x64 compressed. I think that is the right file. That should be the same name, right? Yep, that is the same name. There's also like a content check because this has some hash. Like this file, when we download it, we can compute a checksum. And I think the way this is built in Nix is you can only add this file if it matches, like if the checksum is the same as what the Nix instructions, the Nix derivation has. Regardless, this should be safe to download, so let's get it. And yeah, I have reviewed this before, so I can download, except not really, we actually have to sign in. And I didn't have an account until very recently, and I'm just going to show you this because it's very interesting. I do have an account now, so I'm not going to register, but you need to have an email address, and you have to pass your password twice. You also need to provide your country, your full name, your job title, your work phone, your company name, address, city, and postal code. Apparently they're gonna send you some lawyer stuff. Not really, I didn't get any. But also, you don't actually have to provide the real information, apparently. You can actually just lie here. I'm not going to say you should do this or that I have done this, but technically, if you did something like 420, 69, 0, 420, I think this would still work. So probably don't do this, but if you were going to, this would probably work. Anyway, we can just sign in into our existing account, which has totally legitimate contact information. And it seems like it's working. We are downloading the file. Now we need to get this file to our server. So let's get back to SSH here and let's find our file. I think that is JDK something. I need to copy this somewhere and I'm going to use rsync for that. Sadly, I don't remember how to use rsync because it's very weird in its flags. So I'm going to look it up with tldr rsync. And now this actually rings some bells, so we are going to use rsync. We want to use an archive. This U option sounds good. I also want to see some human readable progress, make it verbose and zipped. And I think these are all the options, so obviously something easy to remember. Now let's take the file, and this is going to go to, I need to copy this all. This is gonna go to this instance, and because it doesn't have the identity file, it asks me for my password. So I'll need to add this identity file to my SSH agent. That's just going to be the most convenient way to do this. So let's try again. Okay, now it's uploading that. Let's wait a minute for this to complete. Okay, it's done. Let's see if it's there. It is there. So at this point, let's see, so we need Nix store, add fixed, SSH. Okay, actually I can just copy paste the whole thing because the file name is the same. So now this is being added to the Nix store and it ended up there. Let's try to build that config again. And this time it seems like it's actually proceeding, which is great. And it did end up building the whole thing. Now we could actually just start the system, like switch to this configuration and launch this, but JIRA is going to run on some port that we haven't exposed. And also I would like to have some sort of friendly hostname and maybe HTTPS. So for this, I'm going to need a domain. Well, thankfully I already have a domain, so I don't need to go through all the whole process of registering one. But I would like to get like a subdomain just to have it separate. I don't want to have JIRA running on my main domain name, but we might have something like a subdomain, which would be just fine for this use case. So I'm going to open my config for my domains, which is, it is not open source, but it's also not private information. So I can definitely show it to you. Yeah, I have a couple domains here. I already have one for JIRA, but it's pointing to a different IP. I think I'm just gonna copy this with a different name and this will be all. So this is going to be JIRA NixOS domain, and I'm going to call it JIRA NixOS.kubectl.com, and we're going to target the IP of this machine, which is, let's try that again. It should be here somewhere. We could actually just, okay, I can just ping this. That is the IP address. So I'm going to set this and then apply the change with Terraform. So So I can try to ping this. And it doesn't respond, but it actually resolved the IP address. It doesn't respond probably because the firewall config doesn't allow pinging. We could enable that, I don't need to. Anyway, it seems like this might work if we just connect to the instance. So I'm going to close this, and let's get back to our setup here. So the easiest way that I know of to get HTTPS on a subdomain and in NixOS is to use the program called Caddy. Now, Caddy is an HTTP server which has automatic HTTPS. It's actually very easy to set up, and I'm going to set it up. So first we need to find out how to do this in NixOS, and you guessed this, there might be an option for this. And there actually is. So we just need to enable Caddy. Let's try to do that. Now I could just leave it at that, but I know I will have more options than that, so I can just create a group, like a bigger object of attributes, and I'm going to say just enable true, and try to switch to that. I'm gonna have to get onto my instance again. Let's try that again without the verbosity. Let's build. There's one more thing that I need, which is to set up a virtual host so that it actually does something on my machine. So let's do this. And this is going to be like an object, again, like an attribute set. This is the official Nix name for this feature. So our domain was JIRA NixOS.kubecause.com, and is going to have this extra config. That is going to be a string. And for now, I'm just going to serve some sort of static file content. Let's see where we are. Root, let's do something like web, and let's put an HTML file here. Okay, so this is going to be a file server with a root of this is going to be root web. I think the syntax actually, we need a star here. And this is it. Let's see, so let's try to activate that. Actually build first and then activate. Also, there's one more thing I need. I would like to use this program called sysz. For Polish people, this would be sysz, but we're not all Polish. So this is a pretty nice program which allows you to use systemd, view systemd services in a pretty interactive way. That way you can inspect some issues with how your services are starting and how they are running. You can view some logs and so on. So if we activate that with switch, that should first of all start JIRA somewhere in the background on some sort of port. It will also start Caddy, and I can use this program here to inspect whether Caddy started. And it seems like it did. So we can try to connect to this. So JIRA NixOS.kubecause.com, and there is HTTPS, but we got some sort of issue. So we got a 403. Now that's very interesting. I didn't expect that. There might be like no redirection from this to index.html. Let's just try to open that. Okay, that's better, but still not what I expected. That is not the file I created. Let's see what we have there. So there's web and index.html. I actually don't understand what went wrong here, but it might be like a permissions issue. I don't know. So I'm going to change this config. We're gonna use etc NixOS web. That might be just better. Okay, let's switch to this config. And let's see if it changed anything. It did. So I think this was a permissions issue, but I'm also not interested in investigating that any further. So the most important part is that we have a certificate verified by Let's Encrypt, which is good. This is what we wanted. Now we just need to tell Caddy to proxy the requests to the port that JIRA is running on. And we can see the port in sysz if we look for For the logs, we could find the port somewhere here, but also we don't need to look at this. We can, so let's get back here. We can check the option for this in the NixOS option search. So there is a port. Okay, that's great. Apparently it's not in there. I think we need to go to the actual implementation here. Okay, it's called listen port, and by default it's 8091. So we are going to take this port and we're going to make this a reverse proxy to that port. So let me reset these settings, and the syntax is reverse proxy, and the port goes here. Now we can switch to this config again, and what this should do is make JIRA just work on this this domain name that we got. So let's see. It's taking a while, but I can already see some JIRA stuff, and it's there, and it's working, and it's secure. And now we can set it up with a trial license, or set it up yourself. I'm not going to do any of that, like the configuration wasn't part of the plan for this video, but with these instructions, I hope this is enough for you to get going and set it up. None of the rest is going to be, I think, NixOS specific, so feel free to explore the possibilities here yourself. Let me know what you think about this video, whether you liked this, whether you would like some more tutorials like that. Next we could try to run Jenkins or some other amazing software, not necessarily Java based, but anything that you think would be great to try and deploy on NixOS, we can try to do that. Now, the last part of this video, I'm going to actually tear down the whole thing just to show you how to not spend money on this, any more money. Let's get to it. So first, I'm just going to leave the SSH. We will not need that anymore. So we need to find our instance on the list of instances, and I think just selecting it, and then actions, manage instance state, and terminate. That will be enough. So I'm going to do that. It's going to take a couple seconds. I'm gonna refresh a couple times. It actually says successfully terminated, but I can see it's still shutting down, so I don't trust that one bit. Okay, so after half a minute or so, it's terminated. I think I won't be paying any more for this, but we can also see the pricing or the billing window just to see if we are going to pay anything else. I do not understand this dashboard at all. I tried this before in the last month or so, and this is how much I paid, or I am going to pay, so it's not a lot of money. You could probably have even less if you just do it all real quick. But yeah, this is it. This is what I wanted to show you in this video. Again, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.